One evening, as the sun set over Jerusalem, King David wandered onto his palace rooftop, unaware that his gaze would fall upon a sight that would change his life forever. Unable to shake Bathsheba from his thoughts, David made a decision that would set a dangerous chain of events into motion. David sent a messenger to summon Bathsheba to the palace. When she arrived, she was greeted by the king himself, who welcomed her into his private chambers. David, wearing his richly embroidered robe and crown, spoke to her gently. Bathsheba, dressed in a modest but elegant tunic, listened intently, unaware of David's growing intentions. The room was filled with luxurious furnishings, and the dim light added to the secretive atmosphere. What started as a simple meeting would soon become something far more complicated. As Bathsheba returned to her home, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the encounter. Little did she know, the consequences of that night were already beginning to unfold. David and Bathsheba's meeting quickly turned into an affair. David, entranced by her beauty and grace, spent more time with her, and their bond deepened. Bathsheba, conflicted by her loyalty to her husband and her king, found herself caught in a web of emotions. The palace, with its ornate tapestries and golden lamps, became the backdrop to their secret meetings. But soon, Bathsheba realized she was pregnant, and fear gripped her heart. Bathsheba's discovery brought a mix of emotions, but the fear of what could happen next was overwhelming. How would David respond to this unexpected news? Bathsheba, dressed in a simple tunic and headscarf, sat in her home, her mind racing with the implications of her pregnancy. She sent word to David, informing him of her condition. David, in his grand chamber surrounded by scrolls and royal artifacts, received the news with a heavy heart. He knew that this situation could not remain hidden and that he had to act swiftly to protect them both. In a desperate attempt to cover his tracks, David crafted a plan that would put everything he held dear at risk. The letter he wrote would set a tragic course in motion. David, seated at his grand wooden desk, wrote a letter to Joab, the commander of his army. The letter contained orders to place Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, in the front lines of the fiercest battle and then withdraw support, leaving him vulnerable. David's face was marked with a mix of resolve and regret as he sealed the letter with his royal seal. The fate of Uriah was now sealed, and David's actions would lead to dire consequences. Uriah's loyalty and integrity shone brightly, even in the face of David's manipulation. But his steadfastness would only complicate the king's plans. Uriah, summoned back from the battlefield, stood before King David. He was offered the comfort of his home and the company of his wife, but Uriah refused, choosing instead to sleep at the palace entrance with the servants. He couldn't bear the thought of enjoying comforts while his comrades fought on the front lines. David, dressed in his royal attire, watched Uriah with a mix of admiration and frustration. His plan to cover up the affair had hit a stumbling block, and he realized more drastic measures would be needed. The battlefield was chaotic and unforgiving, but David's orders ensured that one man's fate was sealed amidst the turmoil. In the heat of battle, Uriah the Hittite fought valiantly, unaware that his position had been deliberately compromised. Clad in full armor, he led the charge, but the support he relied on suddenly withdrew, leaving him exposed. Joab, following David's orders, watched as Uriah fell. The news of Uriah's death traveled back to Jerusalem, and David, though sorrowful, felt a grim sense of relief. He believed his secret was now buried with Uriah, but the true cost of his actions was yet to be revealed. Grief-stricken and alone, Bathsheba faced the loss of her husband, unaware that her sorrow was just the beginning of a much larger divine reckoning. Bathsheba, dressed in dark mourning attire, wept for her husband Uriah. She sat on the floor of her modest home, surrounded by personal items that reminded her of the life they had shared. The room was dimly lit, casting a somber shadow over her grief-stricken face. Despite her sorrow, the king soon summoned her to the palace, and she became David's wife. However, their union was shrouded in the guilt and consequences of their actions. The prophet Nathan entered the throne room with a story that seemed innocent at first, but its true purpose would strike at the heart of David's conscience. Nathan, the prophet, stood before King David in the grand throne room. Dressed in simple robes, Nathan began to tell a parable about a rich man who took a poor man's only lamb. David, listening intently and unaware of the story's true aim, grew angry and declared that the rich man deserved to die. Nathan then revealed that the story was a reflection of David's own sin with Bathsheba. The realization struck David like a thunderbolt. The room, filled with courtiers and guards in traditional attire, fell silent as David's guilt and remorse overwhelmed him. Out of the ashes of guilt and repentance, a new hope was born. David and Bathsheba's son would symbolize both the consequences of sin and the promise of redemption. David and Bathsheba welcomed their newborn son Solomon into the world. In the privacy of their palace chamber, David, dressed in royal attire, and Bathsheba, in a modest yet elegant dress, held their baby with a mix of joy and solemnity. The room was adorned with luxurious furnishings, symbolizing the promise of a new beginning. Solomon's birth marked a turning point, a chance for redemption and a reminder of the complex path that led to this moment. Despite their past, the future held the promise of a new legacy for David's lineage.